Hello everyone and welcome to the sky this month for May 2022. My name's Paul Martinaitis and this is presented by the Astronomical Society of South Australia, or ASSA for short. So it was certainly an eventful month last month in terms of particularly the planets early in the morning. There was a conjunction between Neptune and Jupiter, which unfortunately for most of us in Adelaide was clouded out, but perhaps some of you in other locations might have got to see that. And also, of course, we had the spectacular conjunction between the two brightest planets, Venus and Jupiter, which made for a lovely sight in the morning. So that kind of continues this month. This time Mars is the main player, so we're going to have an alignment between Mars and Neptune around the middle of May, and then towards the end of May, Jupiter and Mars will come together for a close encounter. So that's certainly something to look forward to. And besides that, of course, there's a lot happening in terms of deep sky because Virgo is up so high in the sky, as well as some of the other southern constellations, such as Centaurus and Antlia. There's a lot of galaxies to look at this time of year. So we'll cover just a few of those when we go through our sky tour. So without further ado, let's get on and have a look at the sky and what it looks like for this month. So as usual, we'll begin our survey of the sky in the west because these constellations will tend to set first. And this shows you the sky at around the 22nd of May at the beginning of our next deep sky window, and the time would be around 9 p.m. in the evening. So you can see now that, of course, the summer constellations of Orion is well and truly gone. Below the horizon, Canis Major is still just showing above the horizon there, but it's about to disappear very soon, and so are the two brightest stars in the sky, Sirius and Canopus. They're well on their way down in the sky. Looking up a bit further, you see the constellations that constitute the old ship Argo Navis, the legendary ship. So Puppis, Pyxis, Carina and Vela. And Joe and I did you can see the ship there, and Joe and I did a show a couple of weeks ago, a target show called Jason and the Argonauts, where we discussed just a few of our favourite objects in this wonderful region of the sky. So if you didn't catch that show, I invite you to take a look at that. And you've still got time to look at some of those objects before these constellations sink too low. And of course, the Eta Carina Nebula, which is the jewel of that region of the sky, is still well placed for observation. So it's just below the Southern Cross. So even in a suburban sky, provided you're away from bright light, if you look below the Southern Cross, you should see a sort of a knot or an intensification of the Milky Way. And if you point your binoculars or your telescope into that region of the sky, you'll easily see the Eta Carini Nebula. Very, very, very rich region of the sky. And particularly if you put in an O3 filter into any size telescope, you will see much of the detail that you see in this image right here. It's truly amazing. In particular, you'll even see these dark lanes and so on. So that's always worth a look at this time of year when you're out under the stars. So let's zoom out a bit and have a look what else we've got in this region of the sky. So of course, like I mentioned, it's well and truly galaxy season, and you can see once I switch on the deep sky objects, you can see how many of them galaxies and other objects appear. Antlia is well placed at this time of year. It's a fairly faint and less well-known constellation, but it harbours many nice galaxies, particularly if you have a larger telescope. But probably the easiest and best galaxy in Antlia, I'll just point out, is here, NGC 2997. So that's a face-on spiral. I'll just zoom in a bit to give you an impression of what it's like. So in a reasonably large telescope, I've looked at it through a 16-inch and a 12-inch under very dark skies at the Flinders, and you can start to see that spiral structure. You can see the spiral, and you can even see sort of a tingling or scintillation in the arms under ideal conditions. It's a really nice galaxy, but it does need extremely dark skies, and to see the actual spiral pattern, you would need a 12-inch or larger telescope. But in smaller scopes, I would still give it a go and see what you can make out. And also, while I'm here, those of you with larger telescopes as well, 12 and larger, there's a really nice galaxy group on the opposite side of Antlia up here. It doesn't show very well in this software, but if you take a look at NGC 3268, that's one of the brighter members of this galaxy grouping. And again, with a 12-inch or above under dark skies, you can see between 7 and 8 faint, very faint galaxies, but all in the same field of view. So if you're like me and you love clusters of galaxies, and you like seeing lots of galaxies in one eyepiece view, that's a really nice target to have a look at. So if you look up NGC 3268 in your atlases, or you go to, and take a look at that region of the sky. But again, certainly that would be a dark sky only type of object. Okay, so looking north now, we can see that Leo is still quite well placed for observation. So there's a lot of nice galaxies in there. So we've mentioned before, probably the best ones, the trio of galaxies NGC 65 and 66, and 3628. So they form a nice trio there, and they're also nice and easy to find as well in relationship to this triangle, which forms the tail of Leo. Also there's Coma Berenices, and last show we went through a few of the nice galaxies in that region of the sky, in particular M64, the Black Eye galaxy. But you can see now that Virgo's so well placed. There's a huge number of galaxies in between Leo and Virgo. So I'm going to just show you one part of that group called Macarian's chain. So Macarian's chain is a curved line of galaxies named after Macarian, who discovered that they all had a common motion. In other words, they're all moving towards the same part of the universe together. So to find Macarian's chain, it's quite easy. I'll just turn the deep sky objects off for a minute. So you've got here the tail of Leo, and that star there is called Denebula. And then you've got this bright star here in Virgo called Virgo Matrix. So if you draw a line between Denebula and Virgo Matrix, and if you place your Telrad or finder about halfway along that line, you'll be pretty much in the right region of the sky. You can't go wrong. You'll certainly see some galaxies anyway. So let's now zoom in to that point. And you can see here there's heaps of galaxies around. It's easy to become lost actually. But this curve of galaxies here is called Macarian's chain. So it starts with two very bright elliptical galaxies, M84 and M86, and then it curves around all the way down to NGC 4477. So just for reference, these Telrad circles, that big circle there is 2 degrees, and this small circle is 1 degree. So that kind of gives you an idea in relationship to your own instrument to how many of these galaxies you'd be able to see in one field of view. So for example, through my 12-inch, I can fit about a bit more than a degree, maybe 1.1 degrees. So I would be able to, for example, fit those 3 galaxies in. So what I suggest you do is find the 2 elliptical galaxies, M84 and M86. They'll be very, very apparent. So elliptical galaxies, you won't really see any features in them. They look like a foggy ball, and often they'll have a concentration towards the center. And these are very evolved galaxies. So initially, when Hubble came up with his classification system, he believed elliptical galaxies were kind of the starting point, thinking that galaxies collapsed out of a spherical cloud of matter and stars, and then thinking that they later evolved into spirals. The current theory is exactly the opposite. So spiral galaxies and galaxies with active star formation tend to be younger galaxies, and elliptical galaxies are the older ones. They're ones that often consist of mergers of galaxies, quite old stars, and generally speaking, in an elliptical galaxy, most, if not all, star formation has actually ceased. Usually because two reasons. Main one being the galaxies run out of free gas, in other words, the source material to create new stars. And it's often believed too that the supermassive black holes that reside in the middle of these elliptical galaxies, particularly when they're active, pretty much quench star formation because the gas remains too hot. It can't cool down enough to collapse and form stars. So these two galaxies here, they'll be very apparent. You can usually fit them in the same field of view. You could probably also spot them in binoculars, certainly any form of telescope. And they're a good object to try under suburban skies as well, because their light is quite concentrated. So these two galaxies are at the center of a massive supercluster called the Virgo Coma supercluster, galaxy cluster. So they're at the center, and they're about 65 million light years away from us. So our galaxy, the Milky Way, Andromeda, M33, and the Large Magellanic Clouds, they form a local group quite close together, but we are in turn also a part of this Virgo Coma supercluster. We're just on the outskirts of it. So here we're looking towards the center of our supercluster, if you like. So as you move along the chain, the idea is just to move around with your telescope, see what galaxies you can pick up. But if you want to follow the chain, you can move along this way. So you'll see two galaxies quite close together. These are sometimes called Macquarion's eyes because they can kind of look like two eyes looking back at you in the telescope. And then you can follow the chain along to 4461 and then along to these galaxies here. So these galaxies along here will be quite a bit fainter, but should be still fairly visible under a dark sky. And as usual, not so much with the ellipticals. With ellipticals, you can't expect to see a lot of detail, but with some of these other galaxies, always try a variety of magnifications. Use low magnification at first to get a nice framing, and then try higher magnification as well, because that will often let you bring out some detail in the galaxies, perhaps a core, maybe some dark lanes, and even things like spiral arms and so on. So they often need the high magnification to bring out those details. So while we're in this region of the sky, there's many other galaxies we could take a look at, but I'll point out just one more, M87. So that's another very large elliptical galaxy, one of the largest known, in fact, and that's just up here. So there's Macquarion's chain. So if you just move your telescope a bit this way, you'll find M87, another huge elliptical galaxy, and this one has historical importance because you may recall a couple of years ago the first image of a black hole's event horizon was obtained, and this is the galaxy where they took that photo. So in the middle of this galaxy, like all galaxies, almost all galaxies, there's a super massive black hole. The one in the core of this galaxy is one of the largest known. So you can see there on the left, there's a picture from the Event Horizon telescope showing the Event Horizon shape. So that was a virtual radio telescope consisting of many different telescopes around the globe joined together to form a virtual telescope. So you won't see the black hole event horizon visually, of course, but the black hole has an accretion disk around it of material that's swirling very, very quickly, generating a lot of friction and releasing X-rays and other high energetic particles. And those particles are ejected perpendicular to the disk, forming a jet. And you can see the jet there pointed to by the yellow arrow in this Hubble Space Telescope picture of M87. And there have been quite a few credible reports of people with amateur-sized telescopes, 12 inches and above, being able to observe a portion of that jet. So if you're after an observing challenge and you've got a medium to large telescope, that's a good one to go for. The main key ingredient seems to be magnification. So people have typically used between 500 and 600 times magnification, which seems like a lot for a galaxy. But the idea is the galaxy's pretty bright. It's got a high surface brightness, and you need that magnification to bring out enough contrast to see the jet, because the jet itself is relatively small. So if you're interested in looking for the jet, if you do a web search on visually observing the M87 jet, you'll find some articles, and they'll show you a photo to help you identify the location of the jet, where it's pointing. So looking to the south now, and you can see things have certainly changed from earlier in the year. So the south celestial pole is about here between Acrux and Achernar, which is now barely, well, just licking the horizon really. So the south celestial pole's about there, and things have really now swung around. Southern Cross is now really right at the 12 o'clock position. And the main, lots of constellations we could talk about, but the main one to look out for is, of course, Centaurus. That's very high in the sky now. So we talked about a few constellations from that last time, including the Deep Sky Object of the Month, NGC 5128, and also Omega Centauri as well. One of the brightest and certainly the largest globular cluster known. The other thing to bear in mind in Centaurus is a huge number of really quite good galaxies as well. So not only have we got all the galaxies to look at in Virgo, Coma Berenices, Leo, Antlia, but there's also a lot of them in the Centaurus region as well. So really spoilt for choice this time of year. Okay, let's take a look at the lunar calendar for this month. So as you can see, the dark sky periods where the moon isn't interfering with our observations, the first window begins at the 1st of the month through to about the 6th, depending on how late you want to keep observing. And then the second window opens up at about the 22nd through to the end of the month. So those periods there is where you really want to observe, to try and get out to a dark sky site and observe the deep sky objects, particularly some of those wonderful galaxies that we were just talking about. In between, in the middle of the month, that's when the moon is interfering. So that's really when you want to do, well, of course, your lunar observations, looking at double stars, planets, and maybe some bright star clusters and so on. So at the beginning of the month, true darkness begins at about 7 o'clock, and you can observe right through to almost 5:30 in the morning, if you so wish. And then towards the end of the month, the darkness begins just a little bit earlier, at about 6:45, and it ends at about 5:45 in the morning. So of course, as we approach the solstice, the winter solstice, the rate of change of the length of the night starts to slow down. So the moon phases, new moon will be was on the 1st of May, first quarter is on the 9th, full moon is on the 16th, last quarter is on the 23rd, and unusually we can just squeeze in another new moon this month on the 30th. And I'll just quickly point out one thing on the 16th there on that calendar. You'll see that it's marked as a lunar eclipse, but that eclipse will not be visible from Australia. So let's take a look at the solar system. So this shows the situation around the beginning of the month, around the 1st of May. So you can see that Uranus is pretty much behind the sun from our perspective in conjunction, so therefore unobservable. Also early in the month, Mercury is pretty much very close to the sun and lost in evening twilight. Later on in the month, it will swing towards the dawn sky, but really it's not a great time to observe Mercury. We're best waiting till later in the year for Mercury again. However, all the other planets, you can see just like last month, remember this is on the morning side of the Earth because the Earth is spinning in this direction in this diagram. So all of these planets here are still morning planets, and hopefully last month you were following the various alignments that were happening. So this month, all the planets are again very visible. And there's going to be a few close encounters. So the first one will occur on the 18th of May. So I'll just swing around to about the 18th of May. And that will be a conjunction between Mars and Neptune. So that's on the 18th of May. And you can see why that is the case, because if we look at those planets from our perspective of Earth, you can see that Mars and Neptune have pretty much lined up from our point of view. So that's why those two planets will appear really close in the sky. And they'll be quite close on both the 18th and the 19th. So unlike the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, we'll have more than one day to observe it. So if it's cloudy one day, maybe it won't be cloudy on the other day. So that's certainly something to look forward to. And then as the month rolls on, from our perspective, you'll see that Jupiter and Mars will start to become closer and closer together. So on the 25th, the moon, there's the moon there, will join up. So you'll see the moon, Mars and Jupiter nice and close in the sky. And then towards the end of the month, from about the 28th to the 31st, Jupiter and Mars will form a very close pair as well. So certainly a lot to look forward to in the morning sky. So this shows you the situation earlier in the month, around the 8th of May. So you can see the planets are still forming a nice long line. So you're going to have Venus and Jupiter, the two bright planets, still quite close together, not as close as they were at the beginning of the month, but still pretty close. Then further up, you'll see Mars getting ever brighter as we head towards that opposition in December. And then up nice and high will be Saturn. So Saturn in particular, now that it's nice and high up, even though we're a fair way from opposition, it's still pretty large, and being high up in the sky, you should be able to get some good observing from it. So if you've got your telescope out, certainly take a look at it while you're there. So if you take a look at Venus, you'll see there it's somewhat sort of gibbous sort of crescent, so it won't be quite a round sphere. And also there's an image of Saturn. So of course through binoculars, or more particularly telescope, you'll see Saturn, and you should also see its family of moons. One of the moons in particular, which is off the edge of this image, it's sort of down here, is Titan. So if you happen to spot an orangey looking bright moon, that would be Titan. And that's the largest moon of Saturn, and it's very interesting too because it's the only moon in the solar system that has an appreciable atmosphere. In fact, the atmospheric pressure is very similar to the surface pressure on Earth. So in theory, you could stand on the surface of Titan without a pressure suit. The only problem, of course, is it'll be very cold. It's cold enough to freeze ethane, and it becomes liquid. So the lack of pressure wouldn't be the problem, but in this case, the temperature probably would be. So let's now fast forward to around mid-month, around the 18th. So this will be when there's the Mars-Neptune conjunction. So this will be visible on both the 18th and the 19th. So if you've never seen Neptune before, this is an excellent opportunity to find it, because all you need to do is find Mars, which of course, no problems finding Mars at the moment, so bright and red. And if you point your binoculars even towards Mars, you should be able to see Neptune. So this shows you the field of view through a pair of 10 by 42 binoculars, to just give you an idea of the scale. So you'll see Mars in the center, and about that far out, you'll see Neptune. So Neptune should appear as probably you won't see it as a disk through binoculars, but it should look a nice intense blue, quite close by. And I've also shown you an image here on the 19th. So you can see that they're still close together. So if it's cloudy on one of those days, you've still got an opportunity to try the next day as well. And if you've got your telescope out, even better. Neptune, you should be able to resolve it as a bit of a nice blue disk if you use enough magnification. And Mars is still very small at this time of year, but I don't think you would see any detail on it at this stage. But if you've got your telescope out, why not have a look anyway? So that's something I'm certainly looking forward to, a conjunction between Neptune and Mars, particularly because a lot of us missed the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction here in Adelaide due to weather. And while you're here, in addition, why not also, of course, have a look at Saturn? So you can see here the moons have moved around a bit from earlier in the month. There's Titan down the bottom, the orangey planet. And also there's Jupiter as well. And you can see at the moment, at this time of the month, the moons of Jupiter at around 6 a.m. are forming that nice line there, equally spaced line to one side with Io on the other side. So going forward now to around the 25th of May. So as the month progresses, as we saw, Jupiter and Mars will be moving close together. And on the 25th, they'll be joined by the moon as well, a nice waxing crescent moon. So you have Venus, Mars and Jupiter and the moon in the middle there, and then you'll have Saturn up high. So that'll be something worth looking at. And there's kind of a closer view to give you an idea. So you have Jupiter, Mars, and then the lovely waxing moon nearby. And finally, as we head towards the end of the month, the 29th, Jupiter and Mars will move even closer together. And again, this shows you the field of view through a 10 by 42 binoculars. So I think the true field of view there is about 4 degrees. So they're within a degree of each other. So certainly you'll see them in the same binocular field, and you should be able to see them in the same eyepiece field of most telescopes as well. And the good thing about this conjunction is, again, due to the uncertainty of the weather, that shows you the difference. So that's on the 29th, and 2 days later on the 31st, they're still close together as well. So you've got kind of a 3-day window to try and catch that event. Thanks everyone for joining me in today's show. I really appreciate it. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you've gained some inspiration to try and get your scopes out to some dark sites if possible, and take a look at some of the wonderful galaxies on view this time of year. So please be sure to check out our YouTube channel for other shows that the Society puts out as well. And I wish you good weather and good observing, and I will see you next time in June. Bye for now.